They show me just where my past has been. I've got wounds that are taking their time healing. My heart, it's a compass that I'm following.
It's been a hot second, but we're back with a new batch of episodes of the Changeville podcast. It's me, Brandon, one of the directors of the Changeville Festival. Personally, I haven't been on the podcast in a few months, and just between you and me, I'll probably be fading off again into the sunset after this episode in favor of our usual podcast host, Matt. But it's really nice to be back again. Before we get into what you're here for, conversations about art and social change, I wanted to update you with what's coming down the pipeline with Changeville. First of all, we just dropped the lineup for Changeville 2018, which includes Benjamin Booker, Princess Nokia, Declan McKenna, War on Women, and comedy from Liz Winstead and Ian Harvey. And honestly, we've only just begun to announce the full Changeville roster. Tickets are available for the festival now at www.changeville.us. We also just hosted our annual Secret Show, which featured Cue the Sound, Vowels, the Sonic Realm Brass Band, and Dr. Jaron Jones talking about telling the story of our change-making community. What a fantastic night that was. On top of all that, we'll be hosting a volunteer day at Grace on December 2nd. If you'd like to give back to your community with some other passionate changemakers and music fans, check out our Facebook page for more information. If you participate, you'll get a free pass to Changeville 2018. It doesn't get better than that. So here we are, the Changeville podcast. What do we do here? Well, we talk to artists using their work to drive social change. Today we're talking with Myra Gleason of Stereo RV. She and her husband Gabe, as Stereo RV, make anthemic pop music anchored by Myra's powerful voice and uplifting lyrics. In early 2017, they released their debut EP, Human, which is available pretty much anywhere that you can find music online. Definitely search for it on Spotify. I reached out to Stereo RV because Myra uses her platform in a way that honestly moved me personally. You'll find out why in just a minute. Here's our conversation. How are you doing today, Myra?
Doing well.
So, Changeville is all about highlighting and inspiring positive social change to better one's community. We took notice of you from a changemaker perspective because of your passion for helping kids in the foster system. In so many ways, what you do provides a voice to a voiceless population. I could describe what you do to our listeners, but I honestly think it would be way better coming from you. Can you tell our listeners what your relationship is with the foster system and what you're doing as an advocate through your music specifically, and just an advocate in general? I guess a bigger question is, what's your story?
About almost 9 years ago, I started working with kids who are in the Oregon DHS foster care system. And what kind of got me into the role as a skills trainer and a mentor was through a family that was fostering youth at the church I was going to at the time. And they were looking for a babysitter with a background check, basically because in order to get your respite, you had to have somebody who was qualified enough to watch youth in foster care just because of the laws that, keep them bound and, unidentified through their circumstance. And so they had me sign up with an agency called CCPC in Salem, and I didn't want to do it for the longest time. But I got a little sick and tired of retail and took them up on their offer, and I ended up getting the job. And as a few years went by, I realized that this is actually something that I really was passionate about, working with youth who have come from difficult circumstances that don't necessarily have their parents, that have been through our sex trafficking ring in Oregon, and a lot of the stories that came through there. I realized as I was pursuing music in a more serious extent that there were stories that weren't being told. And because kids in foster care are such an underrepresented group of people, nobody was hearing these stories, and nobody was understanding maybe that our community in foster care doesn't have to be so far off on the other side. For instance, like, our community is not really mingling with our foster care communities because, one, the laws that bind. In Oregon, we have some strict laws, and especially through HIPAA. And two, the stigma that a child in foster care is a bad kid, or parents didn't want their kids associating with a child who was in foster care. And so through the years as a skills trainer, what I do is I usually work with kids who are at-risk behaviors, who don't have the family dynamic, like a mom, a dad, an aunt, an uncle, or living with their grandma and grandpa. And they're in our foster home in our agency. And I take them out in the community, and I pick them up from school. And what really got me with the music part was they would get in my car, and I would ask, how was your school day? And a lot of the times, I'm just there to listen. And if they want feedback, I'm hoping that I can give it, but I don't want them to ask for it. But a lot of times, I'm a listener. And what I hear is, I don't have any friends. Nobody likes me. And they have these extreme behaviors because they don't have this normal environment that they're living in compared to their peers. And so when it came time for Gabe and I, we used to write these little love songs and love stories, but I realized that there's a large group of people who don't understand love, either because they've never received it or because they've grown in an environment before DHS came in where it wasn't something that was tangible in their young minds and when they were growing up. So with the advocacy part, I've been able to take these songs, and within just my community in Salem and in Portland, because my agency is located in Salem, I've been able to sort of teach our community about the real life stories of kiddos who are in foster care, who are going through some of the same universal things emotionally that we all go through. The feeling of abandonment, the feeling of being unwanted, the feeling of being uncared for. And I think when it came to human, it's that regardless of where we're at, we all have this one identifiable thing that is that we are all human. And what makes us human from person to person is just based on what we've been through. And so that's where I started doing and sharing stories when we have our shows about children in foster care, but also that we're more alike than we are different.
Are you able to share one of those stories with us here?
Yeah, I can't use any names, but
Understood.
I think my first experience with realizing how music was really impactful was a young man who was about 16 or 17, and his whole family dynamic was just off the roster. I mean, he came from a line of addiction, and he was at an open mic, and he asked me to take him to an open mic, and so I did. And he goes up on stage, and he reads this slam poetry piece that he wrote. And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, we are totally hitting the miss with this kid. Here we are, we've got this structured treatment program for him. But when you've got 10 people, like your case managers, your CASA, your therapist, your case worker, telling you who you need to be and what you're going to do and where you're going to live, they don't really feel like they have a voice. And so the expression through art, he began to tell his story, which was where he's been, where he's come from. And it just blew my mind with the way that he wrote his words so eloquently, but yet so understandable. And I was heartbroken because I didn't realize how broken this kid was. And so he was the first youth that I got to take into the studio with me. And we got to learn about, together the formation of how songs are written or how rap songs are written. And at that time, there was a gentleman named Carl Dudley who lives in Dundee, Oregon, who he does all of his recording for free. So me being a new musician in the studio and receiving this free service, I wanted to go ahead and bring in youth who don't have this type of chance to go into a real studio and record their words to a microphone and have something to take with them. And so part of my first recordings before Gabe and I met up to become Stereo RV was I was a solo artist working predominantly writing songs with youth. And this slowly turned into a lot of youth that were coming up to me when I would work with them and saying, Myra, can you help me write a song? Or these are the words that I have. And most of them are rap songs. Most of them are rap. And I've been able to use music as a way to help them express how they feel in a place where they honestly don't believe that they have a voice. I've had girls from the Portland sex trafficking ring who they'll just get in my car and they'll just turn on their earphones. And from there, I'm just like, what are you listening to? And they're listening to, because men and women, we listen to music very much differently. Women listen to lyrics all the time, and men will primarily be drawn to, like, the beat. But what I was finding was actually the reversal here with the kids in foster care was that the girls were listening to the beat, and the young men were listening to the words. And when I asked them about that, it's because the girls were having a much harder time expressing how they felt. A lot of it was because of sexual abuse, trauma, PTSD, and things like that. And our young men were wanting to focus more on, I need to tell people how I feel, but I can't do it in sentence words. I can do it in a lyrical form. And so that's one of those stories that I have. And then just recently, I had a young man who shared his lyrics with me, and in it said, "I want a family who cares for me, a family who loves me."
Ugh.
I know, and it broke my heart because here was a youth, and I said, I go, hey, why didn't you tell me how you were feeling? I said, we've developed this trust relationship together, and I feel like I deserve to know how you're feeling. And he said, well, no one listens to me anyways. And it forced me to take a step back and be like, oh, am I not listening to him? Am I not making him feel a certain way that he needs to feel, and not, that whole saying, like, do unto others as you do unto yourself, or what you would want done to yourself? Well, we really need to do unto others what they would want to have done unto them. What do they need? How can I be their trusted support, not with what I say that they should do, but what they need? So it's been a lot of lessons that I've learned through them, and it's been really rewarding.
Man, that is super interesting and motivating for me. I come from a space where this is all very resonant for me and very kind of top of mind for me. And my wife and I just adopted a child out of foster care earlier this year, which was a very long process. And one of the things that we're finding is that he does not really have language and vocabulary around sharing his feelings, knowing what to feel, and what to do about that. And he's 5 years old, so it's compounded on this, like, how do you even teach emotions and feelings to someone who has been through so much trauma? And what you're saying is so resonant in that we just need to listen. In my case, we also need to teach him the language around it, but to listen. And I think that so much in our world could be changed for the better if we just actively and openly listened to what people had to say about their life experience, because we can't tell someone how they feel. We can't tell someone what they should or should not feel, but we can listen and help people through their journey if they share with us what they're feeling.
Yeah, it's very true. I also feel that when people ask us to listen, we naturally feel like, oh, I need to fix something. I need to help them. Like, they're coming to me, they're telling me this. And I have learned, I had this conversation with a youth actually last year, and she asked me, she's just going on, Myra this, Myra that, Myra, I hate it here, I don't want to be here. And I told her, I said, do you want me to give you feedback, or do you just need me to listen? And she said, I just need you to listen. And I said, okay. So I just let her talk to me for 30 minutes, and I didn't give her any feedback because that's not what she wanted. She just wanted to vent to someone who she just trusted. And that was like a real eye-opening moment for me, that I don't have to fix things. It's not our job to fix people, but it is our job to listen. And through listening, we end up earning a relationship of trust where that will just change what happens through us listening and through us saying, okay, I've told you all my stories, now what do I do? And you can be like, oh my gosh, you're asking me to help you. Yes. And then we get to come into this new relationship together, and now we're both helping one another in a different way that we didn't know. And I think what we have a real hard time with is because of all of our phones and our technology is that we're not learning how to talk to one another. We're not learning how to communicate with one another. And the really cool thing about kids in foster care is they're not allowed to have technology because of Facebook, and they, unfortunately, it's too high risk for them. And if they're not supposed to have contact with their mom and their mom's on Facebook, that's a huge trigger. And it actually ends up being a lot harder, and we have to, it's kind of like 3 steps forward, but 9 steps back when that happens. And so I've seen a lot of good that comes from not having technology in the hands of a young person. But then, of course, it's also that disconnect because they're not connecting in a way that most of their peers are. So this communication line has been very interesting to straddle.
I mean, honestly, like, all of what you're saying is incredibly resonant with me personally. I run a nonprofit here in Gainesville called Self Narrate, where we help people to write and share their stories for personal growth. And we're actually giving a talk next week on the impact of listening to your community and listening to people that have different life experiences from you. So to hear you say that this is what you do every day in your line of work, and this is kind of a philosophy that you've seen in action, is very exciting, because honestly, like, I have worked with a number of people in a number of different lines of work where one of the first things that we have to do when we teach them how to communicate better, how to learn from each other, how to engage in diversity and diverse walks of life, is literally just to listen and not be judgmental. And like you said, don't try to fix the situation unless you're asked. And that is the way that you build bridges of trust and connection and community. So all that to say, like, I am so excited to hear you say that, because it is so what I have seen and what I believe in my heart to be true about society in general.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, I'm one of those people, I'm just like, I don't want people to tell me what I need to do or in order to fix this. Like, sometimes you want to learn, but you just need somebody to vent to, and somebody that you know is going to listen and not use your words against you or judge you or demand that you be something in that moment when you really just are trying to figure things out. I just take a lot of that, like, oh, I hate being told what to do. I hate being told, that I have to do this and you'll be this. And sometimes I'm like, I can't do that right now because I don't know what I'm doing. I just need you to listen. Listen.
So, from my conversations with caseworkers and people who work within the foster system, the job, no matter what it is an incredibly emotionally taxing one. What are some things that you do personally to avoid burnout or to avoid, I guess, to stay centered in the extremely emotionally involved work that you do?
So when I first started, I didn't take a vacation for 3 years.
Oh man.
And I didn't realize that I was on that emotional burnout. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as called self-care. You know, that's really become the word in the past probably 5 years is self-care and what that looks like. Because when I first started back in 2009, that word didn't really exist. With self-care, it's like, no, this is my job. This is what I do. It's to take on all of these young ones' burdens. And so I went to a training about mental health and self-care, and I booked a 10-day vacation after that training, and I was like, wow, I'm on burnout. And so with caseworkers, we are having in the Oregon, in state of Oregon, we're having lots of young people that are getting their degrees and they're getting into social work, and in 3 years, they're done. And we have a large amount of children still coming into foster care. And we're having a lot of the young people in social work as caseworkers that are burning out, and yet we have our older generation of social workers that have been there for 40 years that are starting to retire. So in the state of Oregon, we're in a huge crisis. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, what's really important is, one, I work alongside caseworkers to make sure that I'm basically with their clients 5 days a week, 4 days a week, hours on end. And so they're with their client every 90 days for a check-in and for phone calls. And caseworkers now have 40 to 45 caseloads when they used to have like 19 or 20. So we're doubling that. Our caseworkers are staying overnight, away from their families, away from the things that they need to do, raising other people's children. And so for me, I realized that I need to leave work at work, and I can't solve their problems today, but I'll see them tomorrow. And having that line, I just set a boundary line. And that's what I had to live by, is for my own mental health, I have to say, what happens today happens today. Tomorrow's a new day. When I drop them off at their foster home, I can be encouraging. I can praise them for what they did well. But what happens in the evening, we're going to have to wait till tomorrow. What happened today has to be tomorrow, because I'm off. And you're off. And together we'll reinstate the relationship tomorrow. So my line of work, I think I'm more able to turn it off like that. But with caseworkers, they've got loads and loads of a lot of stress and burdens, because Oregon is in a state of crises, and we're really trying to figure out how to get our kids out of hotels, how to get more foster parents, and how to get people who want to have a child in their home that doesn't come from the best of backgrounds. Mm-hmm. I know I went a little off of your question, but that's kind of where we're at. So.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with me, because it when I was going through the process, nobody really said. I mean, granted, I adopted from a completely different corner of the country, and every system is different. But I imagine that the problems that you're dealing with there are very similar to the issues that we have here, and nobody ever told me that, and it makes me appreciate so much more the work that everyone in the system is doing, because wow, that is I knew it was bad from firsthand experience, but I didn't realize necessarily how bad. I do say that I feel that the world of foster care, adoption, all of this space is kind of a major blind spot to most people not involved in the system. And this may be something very specific to your area, or if you may have something more broad based. But how can someone get involved if they are intrigued or interested or just want to help? Because like you said, there are a lot of legal restrictions to what people can and cannot do.
No, yeah, it's very true. Fortunately, because in the past 9 years, I've had to become creative with what I can do with the youth that I work with. I'm actually on the verge of opening a program within my agency. I'm just getting all the logistics done, but because of music, I've been able to talk to our crowds, our local shows, and I want to pair our mentors and our skills trainer with somebody who has a skill. So if you know how to knit or crochet, if you know how to play the guitar and would like to give lessons, any instrument, it can be piano, flute, clarinet, oboe, cymbals, I don't care what it is. If you're a mechanic and you want to teach a kid how to change a tire, if you are a business owner and can take 30 minutes to give an informal interview for a youth who needs to learn independent living skills and is looking for their first job, I want to pair our youth with our community, because then we get the stigma of this bad kid label away from foster care and what people assume foster care is, and they actually get to take the veil off when they meet with them, and they're like, oh my gosh, this kid is totally normal. This kid was just like me growing up. Because I found the value in relationships is what changes some courses for life, our paths. I've met so many people who, if I hadn't met them, where would I be? Where would I have gone to? And so I find it extremely, extremely valuable that we build relationships, and the easiest way that I can do it is through somebody giving of a skill. And we've got one lady coming during the holidays. She's going to do mosaic artwork with the kids that I'm going to bring her. And she's like, well, I can do art. I can do a mosaic. And I said, yeah, come on over. We'll set you up in a room. And I'll bring like 4 kids to you that I feel could handle and would enjoy what you're doing. And she's going to help them with the skill. And that way they have something that they can give to their foster parents or their family members. Like a beautiful mosaic tile that they made all on their own, because gift giving is really hard for youth in care because there's not a lot of money to go around, and so you have to get really creative. There's also this organization called Embrace Oregon that I've been able to pair with, and what they're doing is they found that a child was sitting in DHS offices for too long after their prior foster parents said, we can't have this kid anymore, or our life is changing where we don't want to do foster care. And so they're sitting in a DH office 8 hours here. Maybe they got arrested. They're back in the DHS office. And they weren't doing anything. They had nothing to do. And we're sitting, whatever movie is playing is what they're listening to. And so what they started getting boxes. And they would get $20 boxes, and this is just the community. Maybe there was this candy bar in there, a coloring book, stencils, anything that they could do, because a child was listening in on these conversations because they had to sit at the desk office while the caseworker's like, hey, I've got a kiddo, can you take him? And so that child constantly was hearing no, which fuels into the already assumed aesthetic that I'm not wanted, I'm not cared for, my parents already abandoned me. And so they wanted to go ahead and take the child out of that conversation with purchased boxes from people where it had things that they could do, letters that they could write, cards that they could read that says that you are loved, that you are a person, you're going to get through this, and really encouraging things. And these boxes are like $20, and it's anything that you could put in that you think would be fun. Dress up dolls, paper dolls, or if you're a boy, airplanes, or if you're a girl, airplanes. But coloring books, things to keep the kid's mind going to where they're not hearing about rejection. And so I think in general, what people can do is they can walk into their DHS office and they can set up an appointment. It might take a couple weeks, but they can talk with a caseworker or one of the staff members there that can tell them more about how they can get involved. But you can literally go out and buy a $10 to $15 or $20 box of supplies for a youth so that they have something to do while they're waiting to see where they're going to go next. That's one of the first basic things that somebody can do, and we've seen that work incredibly well. Also, hopefully there will be more. I'm the first of what I'm doing in the state of Oregon by pairing, but I think Facebook is a wonderful place to post an event and encourage the foster care communities to come out. If you know a family in foster care, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd really like to do this event with you. Can you get some other groups together? It's all about reaching out, I feel. And I mean, that's where people can really start, is by understanding who's in their neighborhood, who's in their community, and what services are available. And that's the best advice that I can give.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the Embrace Oregon box idea is it's like a really good, interesting idea for something so specific and so important that most people would literally never know is even an issue. So the fact that that such a program was seen as a need and then actually developed and created is really, really remarkable. And I think it's something that can be set up pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
Gravity, gravity is pulling me downtown where the losers and the sinners hang out. All the lost souls who don't want to be found. Been coming here for a while now. Secretly I've made it my hideout, the one place that can't put me down. 'Cause these secrets, they have become my demons. I try to.
So earlier this year, you released the EP called Human, and on it is actually the single called Human. And I noticed your hashtag What Makes Me Human campaign. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from the idea that everybody identifies their humanity and their humanness much differently than I do, than you do. And when it came for the kids in foster care, their humanness is much different than mine, just because of our circumstantial backgrounds. So the What Makes Me Human, it was this idea that formed from everybody is different, and we need to embrace our differences, because again, we're more alike than we are different. And I'm a person, I am brutally honest, and I need to be honest with myself and in my life. And there's a lot of joy that I get out of just not having secrets or anything like that. And so I wanted people to come together to know that whatever they're dealing with, whatever they're struggling with, whatever they're joyful about, it's all tied together with what is the idea, what makes me human. My ability to forgive, that's what makes me human. I'm overcoming this obstacle in my life, and at this moment, this is what's making me human. And mine was that I'm learning to love myself unconditionally, like even when I look in the mirror. Like, that's what makes me human, is knowing that I have got flaws that I'm not proud about, but I'm going to be honest and open about it because maybe my struggle is relatable to somebody else's.
Yeah, and I want to encourage anybody listening to this to tweet or Facebook or Instagram hashtag what makes me human, because honestly, like I'm thinking, how would I answer that question? And I think that for me, the idea is that what makes me human, and this is, without thinking too much about it, perhaps my capacity to listen and care and share this community with everyone else in it, and being an active part of this community. So, not super concise yet, but that's too many characters for a tweet. But that's kind of where I'm thinking. So, when and why did you start playing music and writing songs?
When I was in high school, I wanted to be an actress. There was absolutely no way I was going to do music because my father was always like, "You just sound like you're yelling." So I would just play the piano, sit and make up my own little words. And before that, I was writing rap songs with my siblings. And so when I was 19, I was just singing randomly while I was working at Universal Studios. And this girl comes up and she's like, "Dang, girl, you can blow." And it just took that one person to tell me that I could sing. And I started running with it. And I started writing songs, and I got my heart broken for the first time. And so out of all of these things, I wanted to be brutally honest with everything in my life. And I think when it came to being honest, I wanted to be honest about their stories and how music is just lyrics that behind really great melodies, but the lyrics are, what make the song. I mean, you really have to have the melody and the lyrics together. But forming lyrics, it's an art form for me, and it's a game and it's a challenge. But I really want to be able to, in music, give voices to people who don't have one. And even if that's through love stories, which I don't find myself to be inspired to write right now, but Human was the big, jump off from all the other things that I knew was broken hearts, and honestly, I didn't have enough life experience to understand. And once, when you start working with people in the populations, you're realizing like, oh my gosh, I thought my life was bad.
Yeah.
And their life, they're just trying to survive. So how can I use my songwriting for good? And that's kind of where all of Human came from.
Man, that is inspirational, and I wish more people felt that their platform was meant for something bigger. I think, kind of like we were saying earlier, we'd see so much positive change in the world if everybody had that same mindset. I've listened to your EP a few times. I think I've started to absorb it, and I think it's absorbing. I think it's inspiring on its own, without much background information. But is there anything that you'd like a listener of this record to know going into it?
I think for the listener, music is art in itself is subjective. And so lyrics are going to affect each person in a different way, and some the same. And I think it's storytelling. Who am I? That was a big fat look in the mirror for me, because on the side of mentoring, I also get to work with a boys program called P180 here in the Salem area. And these are boys that come from juvenile detention that have been institutionalized, really most of their life, drug use, alcoholism, everything that you can name. And, they come into our program, and the judges got some of these kids have 40 years on their head. Some of them are SOs, which are, sex offenders. And they come into the program, they have 90 days to turn their behavior around. And I look at 90 days as 3 months, and I'm like, oh, so you're expecting me, if I were to look at my life through their eyes, you're expecting me to change everything that I've known in 90 days to become an acceptable person of society. And if I don't, then I'm going to get charged. Then I'm going to go back to juvie, and then I'm starting over. So our program is pretty brutal in that way, but we've had a lot of success with the way that it's run. And so usually when you come to Oregon, we don't have beaches, we have coasts. And our our coastal towns are primarily filled with drugs and alcoholism and a lot of teen pregnancy. And so there was a young man that came up to me, and I said, hi, and I said, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Astoria. And I said, oh, so you're probably just doing drugs and hanging out with all the girls then, huh? And he said, no, I don't do that. I have family issues. And I took a big fat punch in the face because here I was judging this kid from where he came from, and this is the one thing that I advocate about. So who am I is kind of like my story intertwined with his. And, you know, while everyone's got it together, like, I'm wondering, like, who the hell am I? Who am I to judge? Where am I in my life? Like, who am I? So that's, I mean, all of the songs are different in their own concepts, and they all come from a place of just really wanting to make sure the lyrics match the melodies, but also match real life stories. So a long, short way, that's what they'll get.
Well, that's really beautiful. I realize that you just dropped your EP, but are there any other projects you're working on right now?
Yes, we're coming out with a 3-song Christmas EP.
I love Christmas music. It's my guilty pleasure. I said I love Christmas music. It's my guilty pleasure.
We've decided that after all these years of fighting, I'm never doing Christmas music. We're gonna go for it because and I'll send you a copy.
Oh,
but
please do. I'm excited.
Very much. The holidays are the hardest time for youth in care. And so, yes, we're doing a Christmas EP, but on the other side of that, we're going to have videos that are going to match up with kind of like, you know, the truth behind a youth in care, the truth behind that, you know, while everybody's sitting around their tree with Christmas presents, there's a youth that's sitting in a DHS office. There's a person that's homeless. There's a man and a wife who just got divorced. There's people who lost their first child. There's a lot of emotional ties and triggers during the holidays because people have lost loved ones. We have accidental traumas that happen. But yes, gifts, I guess, are great in those aspects when you get to give to others, but giving of yourself, giving of your ears, giving of your eyes, I think those are what's actually most important when we look at the holidays. And so I am not a big advocate for presents under the Christmas tree. I'm a big advocate for giving of myself to others and making somebody feel like they're worth something, that they have value, even though they're in probably a crummy place in their life. So, again, I can't seem to get away from wanting to do something that doesn't have some type of social advocacy behind it, because I just understand from this point of view that it's really hard during the holidays to be joyful when you don't have joy. So we're going to do some videos with that, and then we have we have a single that's being released, we think, late January, early Feb. So
you got a busy few months ahead of you.
Yeah, which is why we're not touring. We're taking 4 months off from touring, and we're just going to focus on local shows and do some so far sounds and just do what we need to do.
So before we wrap this up, we have a question that we ask all of our guests. Often this is the hardest question of all. So sorry to spring it up on you like this, but what one song do you think everyone needs to hear and why? And this can be your song, or it can be any song that you know or love, but what one song do you think everyone needs to hear and why?
This is a hard question. People need like an hour to think about this stuff. I think if you're going to give me the platform to share a song that everybody needs to hear, I would say it would be our song, The One.
You don't have to be anyone than who you are right now.
Strictly because, I looked at our Spotify streams and things like that, and which ones are engaging, and this one is not engaging the most with people because, I don't know why, but this song came from when I was back in 2010 after that whole conference that I went to and met Karen Cassidy.
Which, side note, listeners, I just want to mention, side note, listeners, that part is not going to be involved in this interview.
Oh, okay.
But off mic, Myra and I realized that we had a mutual friend from years ago through random circumstances. She and I were actually in the same place at the same time in Orlando, Florida, which was kind of mind-blowing, and thanks to Facebook, we figured that out. So just a little backstory there.
Okay, now that I know. Meeting this mutual friend that we had, I got a call back from a guy from Capitol Records, and he said, you need to go to I Love Your Voice, you need to go to New York, get me with this music manager. And so this music manager brought me into his office, and he sat on his couch, and he closed his eyes, and he asked me to sing a song. And so I sang a song, and when he opened them, he asked me, can you get down to a Carrie Underwood size 2? And then he asked me if I could come up with $20,000. I'd go to Nashville, I'd get a great photography session, I'd write with a hit songwriter, and I'd have this amazing single that will come out that'll launch my entire career. And so for 11 months, I tried to come up with $20,000, and I went through every which way to try and get down to Carrie Underwood size 2 before realizing that my body is never going to be a Carrie Underwood size 2. I got really, really upset, and that was the first moment where I felt that I didn't have value as a person because I couldn't come up to the standards of the music industry that I so desperately wanted to be in. And so I sat at my piano, and I wrote this song called The One because I thought to myself, I know I'm worth more than $20,000, and I better be worth more than a Carrie Underwood size 2. So that's the song, that's the emotion behind where The One came from, is realizing that regardless of where I'm going, like, I am the one. I can make my own path. I can go my own way. And I still hold true to, those words. And so it was interesting being in New York a couple weeks ago, full circle, performing in New York, being part of this festival, just blocks from where I was first told that I wouldn't have a career, basically, if I didn't hit those 2 qualifying standards of the music industry. So, yeah, that's my story.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I really feel like that's something that a lot of people need to hear, that they have value, and that you cannot let someone else's definition of what success looks like define your own personal value. And I say that because I've actually had 2 or 3 different conversations with different people about that very topic in the last week or 2. So it is something that people need to hear every day in all different walks of life. So thank you for sharing that. And you out there listening, go look up that song, The One, off of the Human EP by Stereo RV. Any last thoughts for us?
No, I don't have any last thoughts. Thank you for finding value in what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the last hour with us.
We don't need permission, we go freely. Don't need no one except the lost and the needy. We have more fun with Jack and Mary. We survive while we have a good time.
Thank you so much to our guest Myra from Stereo RV. Go check out the new EP, Human, on Spotify. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Changeville podcast, and as I mentioned earlier, tickets are available for Changeville 2018. Get yours at changeville.us. Until next time, this is Brandon, signing out.